bright light engulfs your vision. The last thing you remember is being stabbed in the gut by that particularly angry dude with the greatsword. As your eyes adjust to the shining glow, you realize that you're not actually dead. You feel quite fine, actually, except that you are reincarnated as a cat. Good thing you live in a magical world, right? You look to your dungeon master, who shrugs at you. All he did was roll on a table. It was your other party members who decided to try to revive you by talking to the sketchy witch who lives in the marsh. Now that you're back, what do you do about your newfound cathood? Did you even know you could be brought back to life? And now that you have, can you unsee what you beheld in the afterlife? We'll be continuing our discussion on dealing with death tonight on Playing God. I'm Nick Logie, and with me as always is Xander Cat Wrangler Nolan.
Hey, man.
We already talked about the concept of the afterlife in your games, but what about bringing dead characters back from the grave? As a game master, it is for you to decide if resurrection exists in your universe, and that decision is as important as whether there is magic in the world to start with. Xander, how do you work in reviving characters in your games, if at all?
Well, like I said on the last episode with the lethality portion, whether or not resurrection magic is going to be well known within your particular game's universe, or if it's a fairly common thing, needs to be established early on, because the impact that it's going to have later on in the line when your bard inevitably gets the capacity to resurrect dead party members, and so how is that going to affect it? But
I like how you bring
um,
up Bard because it's the character in our game, even
yeah,
though there are other classes that can revive people.
yeah, that's true. That's true. I think clerics can actually do it faster than bards do.
The other classes that are primarily better at it than Bards.
Well, the when looking at whether or not you want to make it something that can happen, because while the magic may be there in the mechanics, uh, it does offer a bit of an issue where role play is concerned. And if a character dies and they're brought back, the effect that that's going to have on your storyline could be rather significant. And the death of that character could very well be something that needs to happen in that moment for things to kind of work properly, or for the story flow to work. That said, if they have the ability to do it and you haven't started out the game with saying, hey, look, I know resurrection magic is in the game, but we're not going to do resurrection magic, just so you guys know. That's something that you put in like the player's handout at the beginning of the campaign so that they know.
Well, there's
Uh,
a few ways you can handle this. So even if you don't put it in like your handout like you do before the game starts, you can set the tone using in-play terms. So the first is in my game, Legends of Latir, it is incredibly rare that reviving anyone even exists. It's not to say it hasn't happened since you've died twice now, but
yeah.
but leading up to like getting that spell, it was a big important thing for Mara to overcome. She had to do the
Yeah.
research. She had to follow legends that she didn't even know were true or not. She had to practice the magic, find all sorts of things, and then finally be able to just do the basic like revive or whatever. Another,
Revivify, right?
yeah, and then,
Yeah.
yeah. So even like something simple like that is could just be taken as a huge deal. That way you don't have to necessarily take it completely out of the setting, but you don't make it too easy to get a hold of. The other way
Yeah.
you could do it if you don't want it in the setting at all, but you want to have a good explanation of why it isn't in the setting, what you could do instead of talking about it on a mechanical out of play level, you could present it as an in play issue that they may or may not be able to overcome depending on how you want to handle resurrection. But if
So
like let's say if you have this big um, like magic plague that's throughout the land and somebody dies like either from it or just in general instead of having the ability to bring them back, they could just immediately turn into undead. That could be a huge problem that you could try fixing.
Mhm.
Um, or you could even have it so when you die, like it's definitely a final thing. Like nobody has ever been brought back from the dead. And if you establish this early on, like first couple levels, then even if you haven't explicitly stated that in your, come to the game, this is kind of how it's all going to work deal, then people will expect it's like, okay, we don't necessarily need to or are going to be able to pick up Revivify or Resurrection or Reincarnate. I don't even know if Reincarnate's in 5th edition.
I'm not sure.
Uh,
I'd have to look.
but you could basically just establish that as the tone, like death is bleak.
Yeah, I think that working in like a grim dark setting where it's more bleak, rather than like high fantasy superhero kind of thing, uh, then resurrection would be pretty much a given that it's not going to happen. Now that said, there are other systems out there that totally don't even have resurrection mechanics because once you're dead, you're dead. It's over with.
Yeah.
Like Shadowrun is a great example of that.
But
But
now that you brought up Shadowrun, when I brought a character back from the dead, it was a huge deal.
oh yeah,
It impacted like so much, and the reason why I also wanted to bring that up is uh, because of even if the system doesn't necessarily include it, if you bring up death as a thing that you eventually maybe can come back from, then how does that scar the character? Because if you're
ooh,
playing a horror game, if you're playing like Call of Cthulhu or World of Darkness
yeah.
or something, and you die, like I don't think any of those games actually have anything to let you revive characters mechanically.
I'm not sure.
But if
World
you
of
if
Darkness
you
might.
die and like your afterlife is oh you get to see like the full Eldritch Abomination as it like eats you for several years and then you reform and it does it again and you come back from that, then that's gonna fuck you right the hell up.
Oh, absolutely. And that kind of plays off of the whole afterlife portion from last episode. That depending on the afterlife that your character would have, based on their class or based on the setting itself, could very well have some extremely uh, lasting consequences. A decent example recently in the game that I play on Sundays with my wife Bobby, uh, one of the player characters died in combat. He was a Tabaxi rogue, and he dies and he goes into the afterlife. And Bobby does a great explanation of like the afterlife that he goes to because the god that he followed and everything. But my character, who was the bard, was like, I totally failed at keeping you alive. There's this curtain of blood. I don't know what it's gonna do, but I mean, the worst that could happen is we now have a blood-covered corpse instead of a bloodied corpse. So, meh, puts him through it, and then suddenly he becomes a vampire, and he does end up coming back to life. And he's not undead technically. It's like non-mechanical wounds and stuff, but the character itself knows that he's on borrowed time because previously that character had signed a pact with a Merilith, and that pact had not been completed yet. And so basically the Merilith got cheated out of the soul.
Your contract cannot be completed as dialed. Please try again.
uh, and so now the Merilith is sending like imps and stuff to try and kill us. And the character realizes, he's on borrowed time, and so he's like trying to trying to get us to take his stuff and trying to like get away from us. He's like, you don't need to deal with this. It's a complete shit show. I'm so sorry. Things are just like, and it adds so much character development. And when role played well, it can really be a good moment, even though it's kind of bleak. It can really impact the character moving forward, and even the other player characters, and even NPCs.
So that's actually a really cool idea. If somebody died, like this is what I was just thinking about. Like it could explain why coming back as a some kind of evil undead would make sense in maybe a particular universe instead of you just automatically becoming evil. Like, say you have a character who's been dead a while and they died on pretty grisly terms. Something in a dungeon happened and they've been hanging out in the afterlife, and then you finally get to resurrect them, and they come back as like even as an undead or something else, and then when they come back, they're like, "Why did you rip me away from heaven, you fucks?"
I hate
And
your
then
guts. What is wrong
yeah,
with you?
so it's like you were ripped out of paradise to come back into the shittiness.
Yeah, I do believe that like the spell's description does say a willing soul, but you can you can wooge that with the
Undead
player
aren't
however you
willing
want to.
is the thing.
Oh, ooh,
That's
ooh.
why that's why they turn evil. It's like, why did you do that?
You son of a
Now
bitch.
I technically live forever.
Oh man, that's pretty tough.
And on the flip side of that coin, like if your setting doesn't have an afterlife, if characters or if anybody's supposed to stay dead, like with Shadowrun, in my universe, I don't know if it listed in the book anywhere, but there's no afterlife in my universe. Or it might just be another game where you don't have one. What happens when somebody dies and then comes back later? Like how do they experience that? Do they when they die, do they just like close their eyes and then the next moment snaps open and they're like, "What the hell just happened? Why am I fine?" Uh, and
How do
maybe
they get back to the city?
maybe yeah, maybe years have passed and you just immediately skip all that time, or you you like know you're dying and you're like you said your final words and then you come back and you just something just doesn't feel right. Nothing feels right, and you can't quite put your finger on it. But you feel intrinsically that you're not supposed to be here anymore. Like that could be good role play for the player.
Oh yeah,
Might be a wee heavy. So if you're gonna bring somebody back to life as a GM at least, make sure that they're cool with you doing that. Unless you specifically change them to an NPC, in which case still make sure they're cool with that.
yeah.
Uh, just because they played the character, it's kind of rude.
Yeah, once a player character dies, even if they become back as an NPC, make sure that the things that happen to that player or that character are okay with the player, because a lot of things can change throughout a campaign's lifetime, and sometimes those things demand a certain kind of understanding. And if using a PC as an NPC, uh, to deliver that, but it wouldn't been within the character, could really upset uh, your gaming group. And if the player is still in the campaign, just as a new character, it could really kind of create tension. You want to try and stay away from that as best as possible.
Yeah, especially if you bring them back and they're like, "What? Oh, I would have still played him if I knew this was an option."
Oh yeah, totally. Like yeah, you gotta be careful with that too. Uh, make sure that the things going forward, because at the end of the day, the character may be a part of the story and you're the GM, but that character is a intrinsic part of that player's very existence. When you sit down and you roll out your stats and you come up with a backstory and you create a new character, a part of your soul, at least for me, kind of goes into the creation.
Well,
And
that's why I can't play
yeah,
Zavia, even though that
yeah,
character is an important part because the player did it, and I don't know how the character would respond to the new stuff
yeah,
that's coming out, and I
yeah.
don't want to
And it
take
we
that away from, even though that player doesn't isn't in our group anymore. It still would feel weird if I tried to take up that control.
that mantle. Now she can be an NPC that we don't directly interact with, but
Yeah,
like
that's why
we're
anytime
sending
you
some
do
stuff
want
to
to interact
Zavia.
with her, I'm just like, okay, she sends like a letter that says this, or she tells you. I don't role play the character. I just
Yeah,
do the. She tells you this and this.
Yeah. Now, if the player is part of the game, just another character, or they're available to play that NPC as the voice and kind of provide that insight into who the character is, totally go for that because that could create some interesting plays for role play, and
I
that's why we're
usually
here
I
to tell a good
usually
story.
try to avoid doing that if the player's still there. If somebody's like either retired a character or they've died or something, then I try to not ever bring that character back, like in any capacity, unless the players mention it. Because then
Yeah.
then you might have that longing to play the character that you already gave up on, and
Oh
then
man, yeah.
that could, yeah, I mean, I know I've felt that way. It's like if I have a character that dies, then I'm just like, just let them. If resurrection isn't a thing that's feasible very soon, then fuck it, they're just done.
Yeah, they're gone.
Because if I make a new character, I'll want to play that one again when it's available. And then what happens to my new
Your
character?
new
Do
guy, yeah.
they fall to the wayside? Did they die? What if they die? What if I still want to play them after I played the other guy again?
Yeah. Well, that actually brings up a new an interesting kind of point is rolling a new character for your next character for that player if they're
Yeah,
continuing the game.
yeah. Let's talk about rolling a new character. First question for you, because and GMs do this all differently, and I usually don't. But do you ever have like the make another character as a side thing, like just in case kind of deal?
Um, I have in the past presented ideas to players like, "Hey, you guys are about to go into a really tough place, and it's very likely that one of your characters might die, and you guys don't have any resurrection magic, so." If you want to make another character or use a one-shot character that I have in my game already prepared, that's cool. But look to that. Now, that being said, I tend to try and not let them have that character created um, and sitting on the back burner for a long period of time
Now, that's kind of
uh,
more what I was getting at. If you're
prior.
if you're like one of those GMs who are like, we're about to start a campaign, make two characters, and then pick one and hold the other
Yeah.
one just in case. Because
Ugh.
I don't do that. I don't think you do that.
I can't do that. Like I will tell you, create a character if your character could possibly die. After that point, you can hang on to the character if you want to. That's up to you. But the uh, the crisis has been averted.
Hmm.
The point at which you needed to have that is over with, and the next time it happens, you can come back to that character if you want to. But I will tell you, roll up another character because this could be bad. But if you have a character sitting on the dock in the chute, ready to go from the very beginning of the game, you're going to want to play them because that's just how it works. When you create a character, you want to play it. You don't
Yeah.
always have the
Yeah, yeah,
opportunity
yeah.
to,
Nobody's gonna sit down
but
and
you
it's
want
like,
to.
I hate this character so much, begrudgingly rolling 4d6 and taking the best three.
Yeah, because like creating a character is one of the most fun portions of a Dungeons and Dragons, World of Darkness, every single gaming platform out there. Creating the character is like the mini game before the main quest line of any like Oblivion game. It's like
It's
that.
the appetizer. What an appetizer is
It's
supposed to do. Get you hungrier for the actual meal.
yeah. And so like I will sit and I will roll characters for fun sometimes just to kind of get an idea for maybe an
Dude,
NPC that I
no.
have.
Not doing that. I have little enough time as it is.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, like, if I'm like, all right, so this NPC, he's fairly new. He's just getting introduced this season, but I don't know. Maybe I should give him a character. You know what? I'm gonna give him a character sheet and see how it goes.
Just always
Uh,
give him good
a-
old college try.
and sometimes they become more than just that NPC.
Okay, I'll do that
So
if
yeah.
it's like not hard to roll a character. Like
Well,
I did that for Shadowrun using the lifestyle or not lifestyle. Is that the one?
Yeah, lifestyle modules.
Yeah, the modules. Yeah, out of that because that was just like pick this thing, pick this thing, pick this thing, and you're like, all right, I'm done.
Yeah,
So
that was
I,
a
I could do
lot
that.
easier.
I could do
Yeah.
that. But if it's like roll up an entire like Pathfinder character, then you best believe I'm gonna either play that character or not do it.
Yeah. I mean, now for 5th edition specifically, I can roll a new character in a matter of like 12, 13 minutes total, if it's as long as it's not a spellcaster.
I was really hoping for a much higher like denomination of times. Oh, this is 12, 13 hours. It's like, whoa, dude, that's way too slow.
Well, you're taking way too long to do that. Yeah.
Writing a
Like
whole novel about your character over there.
now I don't have a detailed backstory from anything, but the character sheet is filled out and we have them fleshed out mechanically, as long as it's not a spellcaster, because that add another
Dude,
3 hours
fucking
for the
spellcasters a
spells.
pain in the ass. That's why, yeah. But anyway,
They
with
are a pain in the ass.
um, when it comes to rolling a new character, what I would do, like, so if somebody dies in the middle of a game session,
Mm.
obviously you still have the rest of the combat and the other shit that you had to resolve already. I feel like that provides a good opportunity for whoever has just died to first take a minute if they need it to like get over the
Oh
character
yeah.
if that's necessary, and second they could use basically uh, the time that would normally just be downtime while they wait for something else to come at them, uh, to instead just start rolling a new character.
Hmm.
It's already fresh. I mean, if they want to, that is. They don't have to,
Yeah.
but
That
I
that
I think it's a good time because it keeps them in the game, engaged with
yeah.
the story. They don't miss anything. And if they have any questions, they could literally just look up and be like, "Hey GM, can I do this?"
That's a good place. Now, everybody takes a character's death differently. I know that I take character death pretty hard. Um, I know that our friend Jess, she's very well connected to her characters. I'm pretty sure it hasn't happened yet, thankfully, but I'm pretty sure she would probably be in the same vein as I am. I don't think I would be capable of rolling into character during that downtime area, but there are people out there that can and do.
I can
Uh,
and have done that
yeah.
before.
Um, and that brings up an interesting kind of bit to being a GM, is the introduction of a new character on the fly. So Nick, how have you done with that? Because I've introduced new characters on the fly as well, uh, but I'm interested to hear how you do this.
New characters on the fly. What do you mean by that
Like
specifically?
say they're in the process of rolling a new character and they're completed with it.
Someone
Uh,
finishes in like 15 minutes. Is that kind of
Oh no no
thing?
no! Like into the next session. Not that
You're
session.
talking about
You don't want
introducing another character?
to. Yeah, because
Oh,
that's
okay.
technically on the fly. Like you're in the middle of a dungeon. How do you do that?
Oh, that okay. That's a complete. That was much different than I thought you were talking about. I thought you meant like creating that character on the fly. It's like, why am I doing that? I'm not the one who died.
It's like a god didn't die. Fuck you. Urgh.
uh, dude, I love trying to write random things in the middle of my story. Uh, I would try to find if somebody has come up with a character like within that game session, or they already have one prepared or something like that, then I will figure out like if somebody dies, we're probably gonna take 5 minutes or so anyway. So I'm gonna use that time while everybody else is using the bathroom or getting snacks or whatever to look over like the character's backstory, even if it's like a minimalist ass backstory, and see how I could explain their way into the dungeon or wherever. Now, normally I'd do this by providing the new character a different mission than the party's on, and just like they happen to be at the same place, but still doing different things. So if uh, this isn't a new character kind of thing, but I had to do this in the middle of a Shadowrun game, which is still one of my favorite things that I've done. Um,
Ooh.
it was we were one of the players didn't want to play. He lived in the same house as us, so he was still like basically within earshot in his room. So we were playing the game and it was getting cool. Everybody was had like piled into these cars to leave Seattle, which means they had to go through a border checkpoint because Seattle's its own little island in the middle of Native American territory. And so that's about when they got to the checkpoint and like some shit was gonna go down. That's about the same time when that player who didn't want to play wanted to come back in. So his character, obviously, at the moment, was nowhere to be seen. And I was like, fuck, how am I supposed to do this? So I was like, okay, I'll think of something. So I just started doing stuff with the border patrol thing, and they like ended up getting into a gunfight with some
Oh
gangers
shit!
who
Was that the
were
truth?
yes when they got into a gang fight that just happened to erupt while they were there. It wasn't specifically at them. It was just a problem. So they started dealing with the problem. And I was like describing how because there was like a traffic and there was like this car that this one guy like took cover on, was like shooting over, and like another guy was like kicking somebody through a door and shit like that. And so then I was like, oh wait, I got it. And so I turned to the player who wanted to come in. I was like, okay, we're gonna have to back up a bit. Here is what you're presented with. So I went through like this role play thing where he took a job from a Johnson, completely different from why the rest of them were going through the border, but he needed to go to a specific place just past it. And so what I ended up doing was, okay, so you get to this border, and I retold the exact story that just happened, except from a different perspective, his. So instead of having like him just being there for some reason, I re-narrated it, and then I said, so some dude is taking cover on your car and shooting at people who looks like you happen to know. So then that player stepped out of the car that guy was just at, who it was just supposed to be an NPC originally, and then just capped that guy. It's like, don't touch my car. And then he was in the game. And everybody was like, what are you doing here? And he's like, what are you doing here?
What the fuck are you leaving Seattle for? Oh man, I remember that. That was actually, I think that was my very first game as Slick. Uh, yeah, it was my first game as Slick.
That was
Uh,
easily one of my favorite and like
uh
coolest
ma-
GMing moments.
Masterful, because I didn't even know. I had no idea.
It was so
I thought you were
good.
just pulling him back in from previously, but it was like planned for that. You did it all on that fly.
Yeah, I had to. He came into the game halfway through. What do you think I had? I didn't have that prepared.
I
He
seriously
just
thought
wanted
you
to
did.
come in. I was like, here we go. I just thought it was cool to change the perspective about. The car just coincidentally happened to look really nice already when I was describing it, and he
Yeah,
would drive a really nice car. So when that
yeah, yeah.
connected in my brain, I was like, oh, I have to do this now.
That's great. I didn't even know. Like now that, ladies and gentlemen, I remember this moment from the game, and it was so seamless. I had no idea that it wasn't actually planned. Like Nick wasn't just sitting there. Like he's like, "All right, hang on, guys." Sends a text. Yo, Dylan, come over to the house and get prepared. Like
Nope.
I seriously thought that that's what you were doing. Like,
Nope. He was just like, I
damn.
wanted to want to play, and I was like, okay. And then I thought about it for like 30 seconds, and I was like, all right. Here's a mission that this Johnson presents you. You're meeting a dude here for this reason, and that was also when I made up well, Mr. Johnson obviously, but the
Yeah.
that Orc Johnson with the Lenin style sunglasses,
And the glasses that
yeah,
you wore.
that I actually bought because for the character. Yeah,
That's
that
awesome.
that guy he was literally just made up on the fly. The whole thing was, and then it turned into some awesome. So yeah, there you go. That's how you do
It
it.
did. Uh, my only I've only had to do this twice, um, and like I say all the time, I like to have something stuffed in my back pocket. And one of those things I like to have in my back pocket is a general description of a kind of cell where a person is being held. And if I have to throw a new character or a new NPC, uh, or I have to throw one of the players into the dungeon, I already have this kind of little bit set up already, and the guards and the dialogue and all that stuff. But if you're in the middle of a dungeon and you have to introduce a new character, a couple of the rooms down after they've taken a long rest, they've dealt with the death of their friend, and let's say it's the next session, they go a couple of rooms down and they see a couple of goblins, let's say, guarding a door with bars in the window. And so those goblins are talking back and forth, and none of you speak goblin, so you don't understand what they're saying.
Mhm.
But you go in there, murder them in cold blood, and then
It's actually surprising the goblins lasted long enough to talk in a language you didn't understand.
but you get your rogue to crack open the door, and there, laying on the floor in a pair of manacles, is
Is your
the new
is your
player's
dude?
your new
You know,
dude.
that actually works on many levels, even if you don't have, like, you're not in a dungeon, like a dungeon when you think D&D. But
Yeah,
like that actually, for especially more serious roleplay moments, that could work really well. Like you're infiltrating a castle, and then you're in their dungeon, and you're like, wait a minute, why are you arrested? Why should we let you out? And then,
yeah,
yeah, that's immediate roleplay, and they have to think, and both parties have to like think about whether or not the other side can be trusted.
that's
Because even the
yeah.
person in the cell is like, you just killed all those guards.
So
What makes me think you're not gonna kill me?
like, if you let me out of here, you're probably gonna slit my throat.
May- may-
So how
may-
about no?
Maybe I'm
I'll
not
just stay in
trapped in
jail.
here behind the bars, but you're trapped out there on the other side of the bars.
Uh, not protection for you, protection for them. What? Yeah. Now, like I like to have something like that, just kind of stuffed away. And I've had to do this particular thing on two separate occasions. The first time, it actually happened in a Shadowrun game that I was running. It was really short, but they were infiltrating a laboratory in one of the corps. I think it was. I can't remember which
It's
one
a
it was.
laboratory. I'm gonna assume Evo.
Yeah, actually, it was Evo. Holy shit. Yeah. Okay, so yeah, it was Evo Corp in Shadowrun, 5th Ed, and they were infiltrating this laboratory to get some R&D for this weapon that was being developed, and this Johnson really wanted to get a hold of it for its client. And while they were there, they came across a bunch of people who were behind these kind of cells with these big glass doors, and some of them like looked like they had like stuff sticking out of them, and it was actually like horns, and there was a man with like a fly's head, and they were like doing
Jeff
this.
Goldblum was in there. I
Yeah,
forgot
I know,
about
right?
it.
That was
Wait, was I
actually
in this game?
no, I don't. No,
Okay,
you weren't.
because this didn't sound familiar, so I had to be
No,
sure.
you were not in this one. But in this moment, there's the new character, behind one of these glass doors, and he's the only one that does not seem to have been affected yet. And it turns out that he was also injected with a different strain of the serum, and that particular serum later on would awaken some stuff that would happen, and it was interesting. But that particular scene I hadn't prepared for, because the character died suddenly and with no warning, because what one of the guards at the front gates of this place capped his ass in one shot, just done. I was like, wow, how the
Shadowrun will do
fuck?
that.
Yeah, because
Guns
this is
kill you.
lethal shit. Guns will kill you, and knives will cut you wide open. Uh,
Don't
but
fucking touch swords.
oh no. Uh, but I had no idea how I was going to introduce this character, and I'm like, hey, they have jails and prisons and stuff all over the place for different reasons. Why not him be a
Why
lab
not
animal?
one of them reasons be that this character's in there?
So that's one of my more favorite means of introducing a character is they are there being held against their will for reason X, and you guys being the heroes.
Yeah, as soon as you can get
Uh,
somebody back into the game, then
yeah.
that immediately starts the enjoyment up again. So I always strive for it.
Oh, absolutely.
Now we've talked about rolling new characters to some degree, and then went off on that huge ass tangent, which I really
Tangents. Yeah.
love talking about. A concept that I wanted to bring up is legacy characters.
Ah.
I
Yes.
know you were asking about that before we started the recording today, Xander,
Mhm.
and to elaborate on what that means is if you have another character not like completely rolled up but kind of lined up in a certain sense, like if the example I used earlier with Xander was you're a wizard, you're like, I don't know, you're a human, you're like 80 something, you're getting up there, you're already up there, and either you die of old age, you die of adventuring, or you just actually retire and use your ability to teleport throughout anywhere you want to just go steal things or whatever. Uh, you could, instead of having like a brand new character, you have to try to figure out motivations or whatever else for like a brand new character. You could instead play that wizard's apprentice. Somebody
Yeah.
who's like been studying magic. So maybe your wizard died and you're like, I really like playing wizard. Uh, he had an apprentice, so maybe that's how you get into like that early spell casting. Or maybe the apprentice wasn't really an apprentice, more like some kid that the wizard decided to look after he was found orphaned in some burned down village.
Mhm.
And so even if you want to play like a fighter or another kind of class, maybe you have a good reason to pick up that one feat that you see in like any game where it's like, some zero level spells or whatever because
Yeah.
you're hanging around a wizard. You just kind of picked it up. Or if you play a sorcerer, you're like, I wasn't really paying attention to anything in class, but I could still throw fireballs. And the wizard's like, why? I studied for years to figure that out.
It's like son of a bitch. Yeah. I think Norman actually is a great example of the opportunity to be there.
Oh yeah,
For one
just
of
a
Jesse's characters,
just a squire, and then
who consequently was based on an NPC that I played at a LARP that we used to go to called Norman the Normal.
oh yeah,
I can't remember what Jesse's character was. He was like big and bombastic and out there, and my character was just he talked really really fast and you couldn't understand a thing that he was saying, and everything just came out of his mouth was absolutely unintelligible, and it's kind of just born from there. Yeah, legacy characters so much fun.
yeah, or like the child of the character you already played.
Mhm.
Especially if you're like want to start a new campaign in the same universe, and and it's like I don't know, 20 years later or longer even. It's like I don't know, 400 years later, like an elf is born, and it's like their direct parents were around when the long ago descendants of the human characters are are now
My
around.
great 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 grandfather
He
was
fought in
married to your
that
mom.
war, and then you're just like, you mean my dad?
Like,
It's
what?
like fucking elves.
Oh, this is bullcrap. Or damn dwarves. Like nobody recognizes that dwarves live fucking ever.
Yeah, dwarves live a very long time too.
It's crazy. And the fact that Sir Angus McFire is like the 13th,
It's been a long time.
we're just like, damn, that dude's, that was a long time ago. Cause dwarves live forever.
Yeah, it's. I mean, it's been explicitly stated how long that is
Yeah,
in the game, and it's been a fucking minute.
it's like 3,000 years, something like that.
It's longer than it's actually longer than that.
Oh, really? Oh, damn.
I,
It's been a
I I
long
haven't
time.
I haven't given you an exact date because I can't give you everything right away. But
Yeah,
if
we'll figure it
I
out.
mean if you like inquire about it later, I'm sure you'll find more information. I don't know why you
I mean,
would,
I'll
but
it's like, yo, Hush Raleigh,
yo,
how
dog,
fucking long has it been?
I need to talk to you about the lineage of the Dwarven King for some reason.
For no reason at all. Like,
So I was listening to this
well,
podcast on the Sending Stone, and they had a good idea on it.
the metagaming pigeon will not come to see that. Um, yeah. Legacy characters are a great way to introduce a new character if um and that kind of goes back to the whole having a player character on deck ready to go. I don't particularly do that, but this is a great way to implement that. Is they're just the son or the daughter or the squire or the whatever, the follower, that guy
Yeah.
you got served freaking Tex-Mex from one time. Like
I mean,
how your
you could
character can
even go
create.
so far as to like in an exploit your character's already been through, like you saved a town from generic monster here, then you could have just play one of the guys who was there for that, just a regular old townsman who was like, walking his horse down the street, and then he was saved by a bunch of adventurers, and he was like, you know what? I'm not gonna let this shit happen again. And then he picks up an axe and starts fucking shit up, and then next thing you know, when he's reintroduced as an actual character, then he just happens to be level whatever the party's at.
Yeah, like if Kitten had died suddenly playing Daikatana kind of thing.
Yeah,
Only not
although
that kind of
Kenton
bad.
has suddenly died, and you have come back from that.
Yeah, and then taken to hell, and
You went there of your own volition.
well, went there to save a homie.
You made the choice, though.
Still made the choice. Still
You
got
said,
taken to
"Okay,
hell.
bro, I'll do it."
Well, yeah, because saving the NPC was important.
It was, it
That's
was.
Kitten's MO.
Which is important because you don't want to forget the NPCs.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
If you could use resurrection a lot of ways with NPCs, like bringing back a crowd favorite, like when it wasn't really a resurrection, um, but when Grizz came back as an angel to kick ass
Yeah.
again, that was a huge moment, and everybody was like, oh, "Holy shit!"
To beat ass.
You could also use it for villains. I
Mm,
tend to try to stay away from that because it's a big achievement if you manage to defeat one, like one of the big villains. But if it makes logical sense, aka Awanok, who's a demon, and you only killed part of him who was in like the material plane, then it makes sense that he would come back, even though that as a resurrection, quote unquote, because he's a demon. So even if he dies, he still shows back up in the hills, and he's real mad at you now.
yeah. And also the demon bun. He's also running around there trying to figure out how to get back to the mortal plane because he hates our guts. A demon. For a little bit of backstory on that, for some reason, we turned a demon into a bunny to
For
to
some
defeat it.
reason, you like polymorph was just the thing that was needed to happen.
And instead of murdering it once we've gotten the encounter under control, uh,
I had to make a
one of
new
the
character.
one of the players wanted to create a permanency spell on the bunny to make the demon bunny a bunny forever and then keep him as a pet.
Yeah,
Because that's where
fortunately,
we go
actually,
with shit. Like,
that was not happening. But I actually had to make another demon character because then you guys started trying to talk to the very upset bunny who had like glowing red eyes, but he just looked like a regular bunny other than that. You're just like, I wanted to talk to him now. It's like, God damn it. Why?
yeah, like that right there is the creation of an NPC. GMs, remember, you must always be prepared for every single person that they encounter to be a real person at some point.
If you
Even the
mention it,
barista.
they will. Yes, I was gonna get to something as absurd as that. Yeah, if you mention it, they will talk to it or something.
Oh yeah. A great example, no spoilers for any of you that play in my game. But there's an NPC uh, whom, during one of their adventures, they come across a note. And this note is basically paying off the hitman that was responsible for killing the wife of the baker in town. And it was an NPC that they hadn't met yet.
Colonel Mustard did it with the candlestick in the
And
library.
so
I knew it.
they go back up out of the sewers, and because they found it in the sewers after killing a bunch of rats, and they go back up there and they're like, you know what? we want to go to the bakery. So they go to the bakery, and standing in the bakery is this other woman who is suspiciously has like an apron string in her hair that's covered in flour, seemingly for no reason. Like I dropped little hints and clues and stuff, but every single NPC that the characters have an interaction with before I created the game, or while I was creating the setting, I actually wrote out names and the profession for about 75 individuals that would realistically and theoretically be in that town for whatever reason. And whenever they come across them, I'll just dash a line through them and put a check mark next to it saying that they've met this person, this is who it is, and blah blah blah. And just so they're aware that they have met this NPC, or so I'm aware rather. But that's a really good means to handle that. So just so you know,
So
NPCs
Xander,
are really important.
when you were describing that, I was my thought process was this. I was like, you said you made a shitload of names, and I was actually gonna be like, normally I would probably disagree with you at this point because I think that's too prepared. But I actually do just have a huge list of fucking names just to pull randomly. But then you
Yeah.
got to the everyone in this town part, and then my thought process went back to, nope, that's too much again.
Hmm. Like you can over prepare. However, if your characters are gonna spend a lot of time in one place,
All right,
a little over preparation is okay.
tables exist. For those of you who want more like on the fly shit, Xanathar's Guide to Everything has tables for all of that. The
Oh
GM
yeah.
guides are like any game. It's just like roll for profession. Like roll two fucking 1d10. You got a 4. He's a blacksmith. All right, there you're good. Uh, all sorts of tools for that.
Yeah.
Was it Don John, the random
Oh yeah.
generator for
Dungeon's so
frickin'
good.
everything?
Yeah.
Um, is
Now, you don't have to
there?
go as crazy as I do, but I
No.
like to.
That's why I always say something along those lines because it's like you're even for me, you're going out of control with this shit.
You don't want to see my
But
talks for
I
this
can
campaign, man.
appreciate the preparedness of it.
Yeah, the
This is too
documents I have for
much.
this is nuts. I've got 17 documents for this game alone. But
And that's not the worst. That's not the worst.
yeah, no, we can
That's
go a
fine.
little crazier, but no, I'm not gonna.
No, we're not gonna. Next time
Yeah.
you're gonna find out. Oh, by the way, each of those 17 documents has 3,000 pages of fully typed notes each. I'm just waiting for
Yeah.
the thing to come out. Just waiting, man. But there's
Uh,
one more thing I want to talk about yeah, the awesomeness that is death. Uh, and that is when you have death as a character. Because death's shown up in movies and
oh yeah.
everything as an actual entity that walks around, whether it's the Grim Reaper with the scythe, uh, or
Hmm.
the Rad Reaper from Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey. Then he still had the scythe, but I think he started skateboarding at some point. Um,
Like the Rad Reaper do.
That's right, like you do. Like you can have death as an actual entity.
Hmm.
So somebody dies, and then you behold. I'm just gonna use the typical Grim Reaper because it's easy to imagine. You see the Grim Reaper standing there, and he's like looking at his watch, and he's like, "Yep, that's right." And you're like, "What do you mean that's right?" And he's like, "Yep, it's time. You're dead. It's time for you to come with me." And you're like, "Wait, what? No, I don't want to do that." And then you could either have it happen, or you could do one of the classic things, the game with death, where you gotta beat him at something.
Oh yeah, like chess or something.
Yeah, especially if you want to incorporate a more easy like to revive scenario. Then if you play the Grim Reaper at something, then if you have a setting that resurrection is pretty common, then you can have an excuse to bring an early level character back from the dead, or if they fuck up and completely fail the game that they play against death, then they're permadead. So it gives that chance without a guarantee, which is always cool. Um, you can do what Marvel does and decide to have somebody be in love with death, and then all that shit happens. I haven't seen Infinity War yet,
I haven't
but
either.
I
No
know
spoilers.
the concept of Thanos. I can't spoil something I haven't seen.
Not you,
Oh,
other people. If you're listening, don't spoil it for me. I'll find you. Not really, but still.
it's a
uh,
threat, a direct threat to our listeners. Are you gonna take that?
yeah, you shouldn't take that from this guy. Um, I like I like changing the concept of death a little bit. In the last campaign that I had run, Shadows and Sin, uh, their encounter with death as it sit is the farrier, kind of from
Dude, a
the
ferryman death, that's classic.
yeah the
Freaking
from Greek mythology.
Homer, like
Yep.
that Greek mythology, that shit. Goddamn
Yeah.
Hercules.
But the player characters had to go through this cave and then find the river Styx from the mortal plane and get into hell so they could find MacGuffin to do thing and save world, blah blah blah. And the only means by which to get out of the mortal plane was to either die and go to the hells that way, or to barter passage over the river Styx with the farrier. It's very classic a scene from different plays and stuff throughout the Greek
Well,
mythos.
not just Greek, but yeah.
Well, yeah,
Ferryman's classic.
it's been done, it's been done, it's been done. But like I say all the time, it doesn't matter if it's been done before. You can put your own twist on it. And so the farrier, he pushes like the pole away, and he's taking you guys down the shoreline. And the further you get from the bank, the water seems to kind of slow and flow beneath its surface, and you realize like the soul's there. And then you come to a fork in the road. There's an angel on one side, a demon on the other. There's a wide river in front of the demon. Tiny little stream in front of the angel. Expected traffic flow from the mortal plane of souls. And you see Cerberus and da 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 da. But the that's a really good way to kind of
Cerberus is
portray.
doing a terrible job guarding the gates of hell if you could just go right in.
Well, I mean, they had to pay passage, so that's how they got past Cerberus. Otherwise,
Oh, the way your
fight.
description was is just like, all right, you could go left or you could go right. By the way, there's a three-headed dog somewhere over there.
He was right like in the center, just kind of like glaring at them. And the farrier just kind of holds up his hand, and the growling stops, and it's like, you just paid this dude fucking 5 gold coins, and this giant dog would have eaten you had you not, you know. So, but don't be afraid to take death as a character and take it back to some old classic roots. Make it your own if you want to. That stuff, it really sticks with the player, and it sticks with you as a GM. So something as intangible as death can be made into a physical entity, and death is a classic example of exactly that.
Dude,
I enjoy.
dude, I was thinking about this while you're explaining that story. Or you can make death the whole thing. So why
Oh shit!
start in the material plane? Why not start in the afterlife? Roll your characters. They're already dead. And then you gotta fucking do like cool adventuring stuff in all those different planes of existences. And it's like, well, you're already dead. You die, you get shoved back into the other plane. And then you're like, damn it! That's the sixth time this month.
you, you know what? I think you just created your next D&D games for a setting.
I mean, it would work. Like
It
at
sounds
first,
great,
resurrection
actually.
wouldn't even be like a factor because you're adventuring in death already.
You're already dead. Fuck it. You just gotta
But you could
take care of
still
the other ones.
make death be like actually dying in the game or whatever be a huge setback because now you're back on your original plane. How the hell do you get back?
Yeah. Oh man.
My party's
We're
still
on the
fighting in hell, and I'm way over here in the heavens.
shit. God damn it! I'm stuck in limbo again. All right, time to find that stupid doorway. Ugh.
Like, or you're like an evil character and you show back up into the second plane of hell and you're like, "Hey Terry, I'm back." And Terry's just
Uh,
like sitting at his desk. He's just this like huge red demon guy. He like lowers his spectacles and he's like, "Not gonna get a bonus this time. You didn't bring enough souls back here, man. You just gotta meet
uh,
your quota."
that'd be great for like an evil campaign. Like seriously, it'd be great. Um, now, beyond death with a character, it's a great opportunity for role play. It's a great opportunity to create uh, new experiences, and it's a wonderful opportunity for a player to role play out something that doesn't always happen. But as much as I hate to say it, not all of the players are going to deal with it very well. There's several
No.
instances where
Lo-
they
losing a
will,
character can be a real
yeah,
uh, either frustrating thing or just a heartache.
yeah. And when you have good players with, uh, you know, strong emotional hold over themselves, and they understand, this is a game and blah blah blah. We're here to tell a good story. You'll come across sometimes the butthurt factor, and that is something very real that you'll have to deal with as a GM. Uh, the way I approach that is at the very beginning of the campaign, I put in like big bold letters in my game documents. I expect you to be respectful. I expect you not to make terrible jokes and
Well,
eh,
in inappropriate or insensitive jokes, because terrible
yeah,
jokes will always
terrible
be
jokes. Okay,
told at the
fine.
gaming table.
Okay, uh, not terrible jokes, inappropriate and offensive, like excessively offensive, like
Dude, if you just said you can't do the terrible jokes, I wouldn't even be able to play. I have to do
yeah,
puns. I have to do so much shit in order to
yeah,
get
the
this
dad
goofiness
joke is
out.
real. Um, but one of the things that is kind of implied with all of that, and it's clearly spelled out, is that I expect you to be an adult about playing this game. And well, not really an adult. I expect you to be respectful, and I expect you to hold a certain level of competency in my games because there's a lot of themes that could get kind of crazy, and there's a lot of jokes, and it's all well and good, and in good fun. But the moment something happens that your character you don't like it because oh man, like my character just fucking just died. Like I got one shot. What the fuck? And so dealing with the butthurt factor is gonna, gonna be something you'll have to deal with.
I mean,
Uh,
if
so
you need to ask the player to step aside and cool off before they come back to the table, like,
yeah,
don't be a dick about it, but that's not unreasonable.
yeah. Like you just say, hey man, I know your character just died, so just take like 10 minutes, go outside,
And if it's
take a
yeah,
couple
if it's
breaths.
being obvious, I mean, if somebody just died and it does seem like it's a big thing, like across the table, then fucking take like just pause combat. Take 10 minutes. Take whatever you need. Get a drink of water or whatever the fuck, and then get back into it
Well,
once
soda run if
everybody's
you have
mentally
to.
prepared again.
Yeah, but one of the things that you've gotta you have to stay on top of as a GM in those moments is those moments, those really tense moments where the emotions that you're feeling as a player, not a character, but as a player, start to ramp up. That is when things get heated, and that's when things will be said. And your responsibility as a GM is to keep that control
You got to
and
keep chill.
hold it and keep your cool. And in doing so, uh, you have to recognize that this could happen or it's starting to happen and take immediate steps and shut it down and just don't let it even breed where you live because that will only create animosity within your group and it could be the end of the campaign, really.
And then after the game's done, then you can pull a player aside, like everybody's getting in their cars, going home for the evening. You just be like, "Hey, could you hold on a second?" And then just like if they seem to have a problem, ask them like, all right, what uh, did that like either like just come out and say like, did that seem unfair to you, or is there another reason why um, you're feeling the way you are? Whatever needs to whatever question is relevant to the situation, then you can ask. I mean, they'll probably tell you just straight up. It's like it might just be something simple like I just kind of lost control because I just had a series of shit ass dice rolls all evening, which I know we've
Yeah,
all had, and
dude.
like
Oh
that
my
shit
God, so many
sucks.
times. It sucks so
Like
bad.
like there was you remember that game that one of the games you were running with the cat wrangling one where
Yeah,
I spent the entire session rolling nothing higher than a 9.
yeah. No, like that. It can be frustrating. These games, they're very rewarding. There's a lot of fun. You can have so much fun. But when things are outside of your control, as both a player and even as a GM, like a GM can get frustrated with it too. So
Hmm.
you've got to kind of you got to manage it for you, and then make sure that you're managing it for your players, because that frustration factor, there's a kind of a curved line that goes up and down as your game flow. And if you ride the center, your game's okay. But you want to take them up to where it's not quite frustrating, and then bring them back down to where it's really cool, and then back up, and keep that curve going. But you've got to be aware when you're hitting that frustration factor. You've got to add a little something else in there,
Or you could,
or
or mitigate roles. This is something that I don't think enough GMs do, which is if somebody comes up with a cool idea, like here's a solution to a problem. I'm not going to come up with an example, but there's a complicated problem. There's a sweet solution to it on a roleplay level, and just from a description standpoint. And like they've been rolling shitty all night, or you've had too many rolls in the game already. Like you're calling for like too many perception checks or something like that, which is very common,
oh
then
yeah,
you could
totally
just be
common. I
like,
do that all the
that
time.
is awesome, and it works.
Yeah, don't be afraid to take the reins away from the die, and do some narration, and kind of do some cool stuff, to drag that real bummer. I hate to use that word, the bummer
Well,
that
no, I
is
mean, like
rolling
it is a
fours,
bummer though.
fives.
Like if you're rolling shit, like it translates to an in-game thing because it's like even the character can get frustrated. It's like, why isn't this working? It's like
Yeah, like
I,
I've
I
cast a spell a billion
yeah, it's like
times.
I've cast
What
a
the
spell,
fuck?
I've tried picking the lock. It's like I've done this lock. Like I could do these for breakfast. And it's like, why is this padlock so hard to open? It's like you keep rolling nat ones, and it's like, but at some point, like if it's not even appropriate to really roll that, like if there's no real consequence for trying
Yeah,
again, or there's no time factor involved, then you could just say like they come up, like you pop the lock, you pull it off, and it's in good condition, so you get to keep a lock, and then
yeah,
you've saved a roll, you've saved the frustration, and you're getting to more of the content.
yeah. But in a character death, I think more than most other places, like your character, you miss that final shot and you don't get it. Oh man, that kind of sucks. Or you've been rolling really crap all day. Ah, that fucking blows. But you're rolling really crap, you miss that final shot, and then your character dies. That might create some very real emotions in your players, and even in you, really.
Hmm.
So being aware of that and keeping a good hold on it will prevent that toxic atmosphere from being able to grow. And that's really important as a GM. That's one of your responsibilities. Remember that. If you take nothing else away, remember you're responsible for maintaining the level playing field as a GM. It's hard. It's one of the hardest things that we do, but it's also one of the most rewarding when it works out well.
Which also means that if somebody dies due to dice rolls, and even if they're upset about it, then don't don't take away the death. Don't undo it unless you are prepared to do that for every single person at the table.
Oh yeah. Like I will say this openly. I am super guilty of a thing happening, and the GM's like, "Ah, oh, man, I didn't even think about that. I feel so bad." You know what? Cool thing here. to kind of placate the player because I feel like I was being unfair, and I try to fix it on the fly. I'm not always the best at it. Um,
And as a
but
player, you
yeah.
need to have the mindset that you could lose this character, maybe at any time. Like, GMs are human.
Oh yeah.
They're not actual gods, even though in the universe they might be. Uh, but like, if you're a player and you should be able to recognize when something bad is happening and just be here's what I do when I get shit happening, then I'll like roll the die. It's a nat one. Like I like take a breath because I know it's like the 30th one I've rolled somehow. It's statistically impossible, but I did it somehow. And then I'll try to like hype myself up. Like I'll straight up ask the GMs like I failed miserably. What happens? And then
Yeah.
like because I do want to see what happens. I don't want to just be like, nope, GG, disconnected from the game, and we're out of here. I don't want to
Yeah.
know.
Now there is a means by which you can do this on a mechanical level, even. I don't implement this personally because most of my players live several hundred miles away from me, so it's really hard to do. But one of the things that I used to do is all of my players would have a cup right in front of them while they were playing. And this was specifically and solely for this purpose. And every time they would roll a natural one, I would drop an M&M or a Skittle or whatever I had into their cup. And that was called a Yum Yum. And a Yum Yum you can either eat, or if you roll another natural one, you can give the GM a bribe of one M&M to
No.
re-roll it.
There's
And
there's actually a lot of games that incorporate that, even actually as actual mechanics. Deadlands
yeah,
has you deal poker chips to
yeah,
everybody, and those are like re-rolls or roleplay fuck-up counters or something like that. And you can actually buy the equivalent of feats in the system to give you more
mhm.
of those.
Like the lucky feat for D&D, and then the and all that.
Hmm.
Uh, I like to do that personally. It was really well received. Not the most balanced of systems, but I was running a real high fantasy, lots of cool action movie stuff, so it was appropriate and it worked out. But if you're gonna do something like that, please remember it's going to alter the game's
A, a
mechanics
lot,
just
a
a
lot
little
of
bit.
a lot of modern games. It's kind of just hard to die anyway, even if you go down. Like D&D,
Yeah,
you have to roll death saves, but you get like at worst three chances and at best like five. So it's not like
yeah.
it's immediate threat unless somebody keeps hitting you. With frickin' Starfinder, when I've been playing that, I'm barely sure how you're supposed to die in that game because
Yeah,
they have this mechanic called resolve points, which you could spend one to stabilize yourself automatically. So I
man.
don't know, it's kind of weird. And yes, you do keep getting more of those as you level up.
Oh, wow, that's dope.
It's interesting.
Huh. I did not know that. I still haven't played a lot in other systems. Like I've got a lot of systems under my belt, but that is what it is. But please try to keep your table as calm and cool and collected as you can. I know we went on a tangent there, but
That wasn't a tangent.
uh,
That was part of what we're talking about.
yeah, okay, yeah, I guess so. But yeah, try to keep your table under control because at the end of the day, you're there and they're there to have a good time and to tell a great story together. And when frustration and tension start rising, you've got to be aware because it could ruin the entire experience. A great campaign can just crash in on itself
Hmm.
because the DM didn't handle the butthurt factor.
That's
So be
true.
aware.
The
Be
opposite of
be very
that,
aware.
obviously, is since you are there to have fun, then make death fun. Woo!
Yeah, that's also true.
Make death
That's also true.
awesome. That's what I try to do at least. Well, everyone, that concludes our podcast. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to leave a comment. Tell us what you liked and any topic ideas you may want to hear about later. And maybe that's what we will discuss next time on Playing God.
Later, man.
See you then.